Snorlax you run can really help decide the games. We saw a Belly Drum Snorlax in that round, which maximized its attack and was such a threat. I don't think we've seen a Cursed Snorlax yet, which is a little bit of a slower Pokemon, takes a few more turns to set up, but once it gets going, because of its high defenses and that high attack, you just cannot knock it out.
And looks like the players are ready to get underway here. Brandon going to lead with Porygon 2 and Tapu Koko. Sebastian leading with Alolan, Persian, and Tapu Koko. So right now, Porygon 2 looks like it's going to try to set up a Trick Room, but Persian, of course, has access to Fake Out.
Yeah, Persian, one of the most interesting Fake Out Pokemon, I think, in the metagame right now. It's surprisingly bulky thanks to that Furt Coat ability. So definitely is capable of stopping that Porygon 2 on Brandon's side of the field from setting up Trick Room. But what you sometimes see with Porygon 2 and Tapu Koko paired together like this is the inclusion of a move like Thunderbolt on that Porygon 2. So Brandon might have sent it out on the field to see if he could set up Trick Room, maybe feel out how Sebastian's going to play through this game. Or he might have sent it out to just pair it with that Tapu Koko, bring a ton of damage potential to threaten Pokemon like that bulky Persian, to threaten the Tapu Koko on Sebastian's side of the field. Lots of options for both these trainers right now.
Yeah, and Sebastian, he piloted Persian to the top 8 of the International Championships in Oceania. So, you know, he's a very powerful Persian user. Persian using Fake Out here, going to hit that Tapu Koko and make sure that it cannot move. Tapu Koko on Sebastian's side now using Volt Switch into that Tapu Koko, boosted by that Electric Terrain. Going to do a lot of damage to that Tapu Koko, actually, and going to, you know, kind of maintain some momentum. Going to switch out here. So Sebastian looking at his options, looking at the field, assessing it, and going straight Snorlax, trying to maybe prepare for the Trick Room that might be coming up, as Porygon 2 instead goes for an Ice Beam here. Going to connect onto Snorlax. Snorlax, a bulky Pokemon, not taking much damage at all, so no Trick Room up yet for that Snorlax on Sebastian's side.
Yeah, sending in the Snorlax here was, I think, the best play that Sebastian could have made there to manage the threat of the Trick Room. I mean, you might be thinking, well, maybe Persian could have faked out the Porygon, but then you have to worry about that Tapu Koko possibly getting a knockout on one of these Pokemon on Sebastian's side of the field. So by faking out the Tapu Koko and sending in the Snorlax, you sort of prepare for all possible scenarios. If the Trick Room is up, then Snorlax is more than happy to take advantage of that. If the Trick Room isn't up, though, Snorlax can deal some nice damage to that Tapu Koko. If it has high horsepower, it can, you know, maybe start boosting its stats depending on if that Tapu Koko sticks around. Plenty of options left right now for Sebastian.
Persian switching out here, not going to want to stay in against that Tapu Koko. The Fur Coat only boosts physical defense, not special defense. Arcanine coming in here, going to go for an Intimidate, dropping the physical attack stat of Porygon 2 and Tapu Koko. Not going to matter too much as Porygon 2 retreats and goes straight into Kartana. So luckily for Brandon, that Kartana switched in after the Intimidate. Right now, Tapu Koko goes for a Dazzling Gleam, not very effective on that Arcanine, but now Snorlax using Double Edge here, connected on that Tapu Koko and picks up the KO.
Not a common move on Snorlax. You know, Double Edge, you will take some damage in recoil in exchange for the boost in base power in comparison to moves like Return, but was able to knock out the Tapu Koko there. Doesn't have to worry about boosting its attack or what have you before it can start dealing damage. So a really great move. And if you run a Snorlax with one of those Pinch Berries, the recoil damage could also, you know, activate your own berry, and it looks like Snorlax was really close here, didn't quite get it, but if it had, then it could have boosted its health all the way back up to full.
Right, it's pretty similar to Arcanine that run some of those Pinch Berries. Also, the Tapu Bulu that ended up winning the Madison, Wisconsin Regional Championships also had a Pinch Berry as well. You know, when you take recoil, that kind of helps you set up for those berries, like you've already said.
It really does, and with a Pokemon like Snorlax, usually around the 50% mark is what people will try and prepare to do damage for to get that knockout. You want it to fall just short of the 50% and then do over 50% so that you can try and knock it out without dealing any, or without activating that berry. With Gigalith on the field, Snorlax could just, you know, stall for time this turn, and it looks like with the help of sand damage, it could activate that Pinch Berry the next turn. Gigalith also threatening that Arcanine, a great Pokemon out for Brandon. He just has to worry, you know, Gigalith's such a slow Pokemon, most likely going to move last. That Kartana could move first, has to worry about the Arcanine. There's a lot of things on the field he has to juggle.
Yeah, and Kartana came in after the Arcanine came in, so Brandon right there thought he could maybe get around it. You know, all right, I think I can get my Kartana in here, but then Persian just switched out, so, you know, Sebastian really setting himself in good position as Kartana right there forced to switch out, does not want to stay and going to have to go straight back into Porygon 2. Kind of going to allow Gigalith some time to maybe work around this Arcanine, maybe KO it with a possible rock-type attack. Snorlax switching here, going to go back into Persian, which is great because that's going to provide fake-out support for Sebastian. As Arcanine using Will-O-Wisp here, going to be a supportive Arcanine, going to burn this Gigalith and have all the physical damage output that Gigalith has. So Gigalith now using this turn to set up Curse. Okay, that's going to mitigate the burn there a little bit, but
after enough turns, it'll mitigate the burn. But you know, time is sort of the name of the game here. With that burn, Gigalith is going to be forced to either. I mean, there is a Porygon 2 out on the field now. We could see an attempt at a Trick Room by that Porygon 2 in a couple turns. Gigalith could use moves like Rock Slide to maybe try and get some flinches, but really, he's going to have to invest a lot of time into using that Curse to try and boost its attack beyond the damage that's been dealt there. So great play by Arcanine. Gigalith really was the offensive threat out on the field for Brandon at that point in time. And now paired with this Persian, he sorry about that. You know, paired with the Persian, the Arcanine is sort of free here to either keep setting up a burn on that Porygon 2, is always appreciated, chip away at its health, or who knows, maybe we'll see some other tricks that this Persian has up its sleeve.
I mean, Persian does have access to a lot of cool moves. We've already seen Fake Out. It has access to Parting Shot, which makes it really cool. I believe that was actually on Sebastian's top 8 team in the Oceania International Championships. Oh boy, pronunciation's not the best today.
I know. I mean, it's still early here. I think we can, you know, maybe have a cup of coffee after this round to help us wake up.
Arcanine switching out, gonna go into Tapu Koko as the Persian goes for a Fake Out on that Porygon 2, and Porygon 2, they're not even using that turn to set up Trick Room because it flinches before the Gigalith goes for a Stone Edge into that Tapu Koko, doing a lot of damage. So Porygon 2 really just going on the offensive right there.
Yeah, even with the burn, it was able to deal over half of its health damage into Tapu Koko, which could be an indication that this Tapu Koko isn't one of the more bulkier variants we've been seeing around recently with moves like that Assault Vest, Volt Switch, the Sky Drop, maybe a Thunderbolt. So good information for Brandon moving forwards in this game, but now, you know, it looks like Brandon really wants to try and get that Trick Room up, judging by the fact that it's Porygon 2 and Gigalith here. Tapu Koko might be able to stop that Porygon 2 if we know it's offensive in some way or form. If it's the Z move, that might be what we try and see here, but I don't know. It's an interesting spot for Brandon to be in. If Sebastian is able to somehow set up the Trick Room here, that could make it a little bit more difficult moving forwards. But we did see that Snorlax earlier. We know it's still around, so could come back out to try and stop that Trick Room.
The Gigalith is in better position than that Snorlax because even though it is burned, it has set up a Curse, so that is going to be able to underspeed that Snorlax in Trick Room. Persian now using Feint, going to do some chip damage to that Gigalith. Gigalith maybe worried that that Gigalith was going to protect, as Sebastian now activating his Z move here, going to go for a Gigavolt Havoc from that Tapu Koko, most likely going to target down the Gigalith and try to pick up the KO, which it's going to most likely be able to because Gigalith is much more bulky on its physical side. So this Gigavolt Havoc here going to connect onto that Gigalith, going to do a lot of damage here and going to be most likely able to pick up the KO.
It's going to be close. No. Gigalith able to hold on. You know, there is that burn around, so it'll stick around on the field for at least one more turn. Tapu Koko holding on with 1 health point of its own, and Gigalith firing back a Z move.
Going to go for the
Continental Crush. Who's Gigalith going to be crushing, though?
Most likely going to target down this Persian.
I would expect that, yeah.
Yeah, Tapu Koko is going to get KO'd by the sand damage anyway, so this could be a lot of damage done on Sebastian's side of the field from Brandon here. That's kind of, well, you just see it. It just crushes that Persian, but Persian with that fur coat and that burn hanging on as the sand recoil comes out right now. And, ooh, all right, going to activate Persian's Berry here in a pinch. Going to be an Ayapapa Berry, as Tapu Koko is going to get KO'd by this Sandstorm.
So really great positioning there by Brandon. Ice Beam did just enough damage to knock out that Tapu Koko. Gigalith was able to hold on through the Z move and will get one more opportunity to potentially attack here. I don't think we'll be seeing Trick Room from Brandon anytime soon. We know that the Snorlax is still in the back, so really setting it up at this point would most likely provide more benefit to Sebastian than he would like. But Snorlax hasn't activated that berry yet. We don't know anything about it other than that double edge. So now it might just be time for Brandon to try and get a little bit more information. He's still in this game. That Gigalith, though, it's going to get knocked out. It's going to be 2 on 3, and I don't know. It's going to be close. Arcanine's in the back.
Kartana's in the back for Brandon. So the pieces of the puzzle, I don't think, are quite there for Brandon just yet.
No, and that's the game you play in Game 1. You find information, you figure out, okay, well, these are the pieces of the puzzle I have. How can I arrange them to work out better for me in Game 2? Or how can I arrange them to sort of best my opponent in Game 2?
Yeah. One thing that Brandon must have done in this game to kind of get out of it a bit cleaner was probably maintain Gigalith for that Arcanine matchup. But unfortunately, Brandon just didn't have that much leeway to switch. You know, he got KO'd really fast.
Yeah.
Lost the Pokemon really fast, so he's going to have to maintain that Gigalith for that Arcanine matchup as, you know, Gigalith gets KO'd, and now Snorlax using this turn to set up a Curse.
Yeah, and that was a great play by Sebestian there. Snorlax not going to be able to deal a lot of damage. Persian was able to get the knockout on the Gigalith without any trouble, so might as well use Curse and boost those defenses, you know, get ready for the fact that the Kartana is going to be coming back out on the field for Brandon, I believe. And yeah, get ready, get that Mago Berry boost back. Snorlax is the key to the game, I think, right now for Sebestian. And it's certainly not in a position to get knocked out anytime soon, even if the Pokemon it's staring down is a Kartana.
Yeah, and even if Snorlax goes down here, it can easily just have Arcanine come in. Sebestian can easily have Arcanine come in and be able to easily pick up the KO with a Flare Blitz. So, you know, Sebestian really set himself in a good position in this game. Knew that Gigalith was going to be a problem. Knew that he had to save that Arcanine for a bit later just to deal with his Kartana. So, smart play from Sebestian.
Very smart play from Sebestian here. So as we enter the end game of Game 1, going forward into Game 2, I think Sebestian, you know, he brought the right Pokemon to this matchup. Foul play on that Persian, you know, able to threaten the Kartana. Really, I don't think we'll be seeing many changes from him moving forwards, but Brandon has to figure out a way to stop this Snorlax. You know, he thought maybe he could bring Trick Room, but the fact that Sebastian's just able to bring Snorlax and not even really care if Trick Room is up on the field or not, and be a massive threat is something that Brandon needs to address. Yeah,
Kartana hanging in there from a foul play and a high horsepower after that Snorlax has set up a Curse.
Wasn't expecting that one, to be honest with you.
Yeah, we saw how much damage that the Sacred Sword from that Kartana did to that Snorlax, so that's about 50% damage right there. So that's good information for Brandon have to going into Game 2. Yeah, it's... the Sandstorm subsided right when Persian was about to get KO'd, so lucky break right there for Sebestian. But, of course, that would just mean that Arcanine comes back in.
Yeah, and I mean, again, we've seen all the Pokemon left on Brandon's side of the field. Unless Porygon 2 is running a move maybe like Toxic or something, and it feels like sticking around for a few more turns, Brandon could win this, you know, could manage to figure out a win here. But the Persian is faster than that Kartana. We saw it move first with the foul play, so it just has to do that again. Or, hey, maybe I'll use Feint and just feint the Kartana for the knockout. That works really well as
Kartana hangs
well.
On. Kartana does have sky-high defenses. Snorlax here going to get hit with the Leaf Blade. Ooh, if that was a Sacred Sword, that would have been the KO. But, of course, Arcanine's still in the back. The Ice Beam from Porygon 2 connects on to Snorlax. Snorlax hangs on. Snorlax is going to go ahead and, you know, find its Mago Berry back up and, you know, heal back up. Snorlax, he's just taking a quick break, you know, snack break.
I think we all need a snack break sometimes. So good for you, Snorlax. You know, you know what you need. You do you. But Kartana holding on for one more turn. Porygon 2 maybe trying to go for like a freeze or something on that Snorlax to try and figure out that win condition for this game. But it's just not going to happen. Not yet, at least.
Yeah.
Persian... Maybe Persian can go for the knockout again on that Kartana this turn. Sebestian probably not threatened by that Porygon 2. It's one of those. I mean, we do know there's the Arcanine in the back, and we know that this Porygon 2 has Thunderbolt, which means that matchup isn't going to be horrible, but not really a win condition that you want to try and count on.
Yeah, and Persian here using Feint, picking up the KO on that Kartana, so Snorlax is going to be able to go for a double edge in that Porygon 2 and do massive amounts of damage. Porygon 2 going for a Thunderbolt here. Brandon taking a look to see how much... Well, going to hit that Persian, going to get that KO. Snorlax, again, using Recycle here, just trying to set up. You know, Brandon probably just trying to find as much information as he possibly can to go into Game 2. You know, what kind of Snorlax is, right? You have to be careful about what it is. We've seen the Curse, we've seen the Recycle, we've seen the Double Edge, we've seen the high horsepower Arcanine coming in back. Maybe you can also get some more information about this Arcanine as well.
I think that's what Brandon is trying to stall out for. You know, that Snorlax, even just seeing Curse, I think, is enough information beyond the Double Edge. I mean, the Double Edge, I think, was the most surprising factor about this Snorlax. So once you've seen Double Edge, once you've seen Curse, I think you can feel pretty confident about what kind of Snorlax your opponent is running. This Arcanine, though, all we've seen from it so far is, I believe, that Will-O-Wisp, and now we're seeing a Flare Blitz. So very interesting information. This Arcanine taking on a bit more of a offensive supportive role, which is something we haven't seen from Arcanine much in this metagame as well. Possibly Porygon 2 wants to try and figure out what item it's holding as well. But
yeah, but Snorlax, not even the KO yet, but next turn it will be the KO. So Porygon 2 is going to get KO'd. Again, Snorlax munching on that Mago Berry. Just really enjoying himself out on the field right now. So going into game 2, you know, the adjustments that has to be made, I believe that Brandon has to, you know, preserve the Gigalith in order to be able to combat this Arcanine just a little bit better.
Yeah, it's an interesting position for him because on the one hand, you really want Gigalith to have the supportive Trick Room. You want it to be able to move first, maybe flinch things with Rock Slide. It has Curse to boost its defenses and lower its speed, so he's not worried about Snorlax that much in that regard. But, you know, Snorlax is still a really powerful Trick Room counter. Yeah. And it works well on these teams like Sebestian has, where you don't really have Pokemon that are suited for Trick Room. You don't really have any situations where a Trick Room would be a favorable thing for your team, but if you just add Snorlax, and all of a sudden you don't have to worry about it as much. So looking into this game too, I think Brandon needs to figure out a way maybe to have that Gigalith work out without the Trick Room, or maybe figure out a faster way to remove Snorlax from the field as a threat, so that the Gigalith doesn't have to worry too much about it getting the Trick Room support that it needs.
Brandon also has to be very careful about getting his Gigalith burned as well, because that Arcanine does have the Will-O-Wisp in order to combat the curse of the Gigalith, you know, kind of slow it down just a little bit. So Brandon does have to watch out for that. The best way to do that is probably set up a Trick Room, allow Gigalith to underspeed that Arcanine, and be able to attack that Arcanine.
But then you have to worry about the Snorlax. Like, there's so many things at play. It's going to come down to sort of what's on the field first. And I don't know. Sebestian, though, he knows. He's the one playing this game, so he selected his Pokemon.
He's already ready.
Yeah, he's already ready. He's beaten us to the punch. You know, he does have some other interesting options on his team, but I doubt we'll see them. That game 1 really played out exactly how I think he wanted it to. So probably he'll bring the same 4 Pokemon to this matchup. Brandon, again, needs to mix it up somehow. Kartana out on the field a little bit earlier might help if he's worried about that Snorlax making an early appearance, but Arcanine as well. There's this like triangle, if you will, of the Gigalith, the Arcanine, the Kartana. All 3 of them like can counter each other. It's like rock, paper, scissors, just not really in a good way.
It's rock, paper, fire.
Rock, paper, fire. There we go.
Right now, we are ready to jump into game 2 between Sebestian Escalante and Brandon Tuchtenhagen. 2 young, talented players. Brandon leading with Porygon 2 and Tapu Koko, the exact same leads that he had last time. But Sebestian changing it up a little bit, going to go for Kartana and Tapu Koko. The Tapu Koko going to activate. I believe that was Sebastian's Tapu Koko going first.
Porygon 2 got that special attack boost, though. We know the Porygon 2 has Thunderbolt, so Porygon 2 very happy right now, able to deal some great damage with the Thunderbolt boosted by the download ability, boosted by the electric terrain. We know Kartana has Sacred Sword, so it could deal some damage to that Porygon 2, but it's going to take like a Z move or something probably from Sebestian if he wants to knock it out right off the bat. But as we saw in game 1, doesn't necessarily care about the presence or Trick Room or not. So if I were Sebestian, given that logic, focus in on the Tapu Koko, maybe stop it from using the Z move that we saw in game 1, and I don't think we saw it do the Z move. That was Sebastian's Koko.
Sebastian's
yeah.
Gigavolт Havoc, which hit that Gigalith, yes. Right now, I think Trick Room would be good positioning. Kartana revealing that it's going to be moving before the Tapu Koko is going for a Sacred Sword onto the Porygon 2, as Sebastian's Tapu Koko now going to go ahead and activate its Electrium Z, going to go for another Gigavolt Havoc, most likely going to target down this Porygon 2 as well to pick up the easy KO.
Yeah, so that's a change of strategy from game 1. I mean, if I were Sebastian, I wouldn't be so worried about the threat for Trick Room, just given how the first game played out. It doesn't seem like Brandon was willing to go for it, but getting rid of a Porygon 2 is definitely one of the most bulky Pokemon on Brandon's team. Knowing that you're going to be able to outspeed that Gigalith for most of the time moving forward is just a great spot to be in. And, you know, that Kartana certainly, I think, is the next Pokemon that Brandon's going to have to focus down on. We saw it outspeed both Tapu Koko, so that must be
Choice
a
Scarf?
Choice Scarf Kartana. So a really fun Pokemon to play, I think. A lot of its moves have a higher chance for critical hits, so if you move first, that means you have a better chance of getting those critical hits and possibly knocking out your opponent. We know that it's going to outspeed both the Pokemon on Brandon's side of the field, also a Tapu Koko and a Kartana, so really great opportunity for Sebastian here to maybe get one more knockout, or at least get close to something before Brandon's able to knock out that Kartana.
Yeah, so Kartana comes in for Brandon. Tapu Koko also comes in for Brandon as well. This Kartana is locked in a Sacred Sword, so it will be able to hit the Kartana on Brandon's side for super effective damage before the Kartana on Brandon's side can move. So you have to watch out, because if a Kartana gets a Beast Boost, that's going to make it not as fun to play against, because a Kartana with the Sky High attack stat getting a Beast Boost, that's going to make it super scary to go off against, especially since it's going to be outspeeding most threats because of the Choice Scarf.
Yeah, Brandon's fortunate that, you know, that Pokemon on his side of the field paired with the Kartana.
Oh, all right.
Whoa!
Okay.
Vacuum! What?
Brandon's Kartana using Vacuum Wave here with increased priority, picking up the KO on Sebastian's Kartana. Kartana now picks up a Beast Boost off that Vacuum Wave, which it actually hits for special. So interesting tech move right there from Brandon, as Sebastian uses Dazzling Gleam. Gonna do a good amount of damage. Now Brandon going for a Dazzling Gleam of his own.
Whoa!
Doing a lot of damage since it's single target.
Whoa.
I know, that's a lot of damage done.
Let's break that turn down. So there are two ways you can make a Kartana fast. You can give it a Choice Scarf and then just hope for the best, or you can give it a move that has priority, such as Vacuum Wave, and move before any Pokemon with priority can. So in this case, we've seen a Choice Scarf Kartana, and now we've seen the Vacuum Wave Kartana from Brandon. Vacuum Wave, a really interesting move, not one you see often on Kartana. You probably don't want to drop the Sacred Sword.
You don't see Vacuum Wave that often at all.
Yeah, you really don't. You don't want to drop the Sacred Sword. You probably don't want to drop the Leaf Blade. Maybe you drop the Smart Strike, or maybe this could be an indication that this Kartana isn't running a move like Detect. Might be a hint at what kind of item it's running. We'll have to see how much damage it takes in the next couple of turns to determine if maybe it's another choice item, or maybe it's something like the Assault Vest.
Tapu Koko protecting itself as Persian using Foul Play here, connecting on that Kartana. Thanks to that Beast Boost, Sebastian's Persian is able to easily pick up the KO, as Tapu Koko on Brandon's side going for a Dazzling Gleam again. Going to connect onto this Persian here, doing a lot of damage.
Whoa!
Wow. With the one-hit KO, so Brandon's Tapu Koko right here, picking up 2 quick KOs, and of course also threatening Sebastian's Tapu Koko right now as well. So a lot better position for Brandon this game.
Yeah, that Tapu Koko is dealing a lot more damage than what I would expect from a move, Dazzling Gleam. I mean, it was single target the past turn, but Persian, I think in some cases you can train a Persian to survive that. So again, this could be an indication of an item. It could be an indication of how Pokemon are trained. We really have to see how the rest of this game plays out. But for now, it's, you know, Snorlax versus Gigalith. We're at this point where it's kind of the Trick Room Pokemon versus each other and the Tapu Koko Pokemon versus each other.
Yeah, and this is actually a pretty good position for Brandon right here, because the Tapu Koko can easily just go for another Dazzling Gleam, pick up the KO on Sebastian's Tapu Koko, do a little bit of damage to that Snorlax, and of course now Gigalith can go for a Continental Crush. It's going to be close as to how much damage that's exactly going to do to that Snorlax, and whether or not Snorlax is able to get up a Curse before that Gigalith can move. So it's pretty close, but Brandon's in a lot better position this game. Love the adjustments that he's made.
Yes.
Was able to deal with that Scarf Kartana with the Beast Boost with his own Kartana, using a interesting tech move, to say the least.
I think interesting is too modest of a word for it, to be honest with you.
Well, I don't know if you're running Modest Kartana, because its special attack stat is still super low. Oh, it looks like Brandon's Tapu Koko is going to move first here, going to pick up the KO on the Tapu Koko on Sebastian's side with a critical hit for extra damage. That's just gravy on top. As Snorlax gets to outspeed the Gigalith here, going to go for a Curse and boost its defense just a little bit before this Gigalith can go for a very powerful Continental Crush. As, yep, there it is. The Continental Crush from that Gigalith going to hit this Snorlax for what could have been a lot of damage and possibly a KO, but I think that Curse is going to make sure that Snorlax survives.
Yeah, so now that we're pretty positive that Snorlax is going to survive, the next big question is, will this do enough damage to activate Snorlax's berry?
Oh yeah, for sure.
If it just falls like a little bit over the 50% mark where Gluttony will allow Snorlax to consume it, that means that Brandon has essentially wasted his Z move. It only did a little bit, not enough. It does manage to leave Snorlax with about 75% of its health after it was able to eat that berry, so not as big of a waste, but definitely the fact that Snorlax moved first that last turn benefited it. But now, because of the curse, we know it's going to move second. It's 2-on-1. This Tapu Koko has been dealing so much damage throughout this game. Maybe we'll switch to a Thunderbolt here. Maybe it won't. Gigalith free to attack before that Snorlax moves. Really, it's going to be close. I think this...
Another Dazzling Gleam from Brandon's Tapu Koko. Not going to switch it up to the Thunderbolt in the electric terrain, so maybe indicating that Brandon is kind of locked into that item.
Oh!
Ooh, Stone Edge barely mixed.
So close,
but it's okay. Snorlax here is going to heal up. It's at less health right now than it was before, so a Dazzling Gleam and a Stone Edge should be able to pick up the KO with a little bit more residual damage from the Sandstorm as well. So Brandon's still in good position. You know, Snorlax does eat another berry, but it should be okay.
Yeah, it should be, but you know, I think the interesting thing for me though is after that turn, we know that if Sebestian wants to, he could potentially try and maybe get one more knockout before the end of this game, maybe try and get more information so that he feels better going into Game 3, but with Stone Edge connecting here, and getting the critical hit as well.
It's okay, Stone Edge has an increased critical hit ratio. Remember that. So
I will remember that. I will remind you of it, as a matter of fact.
1-1 between Brandon Tuchtenhagen versus Sebestian Escalante. I actually forgot to mention this, but Sebestian Escalante is currently Latin America's #1 player in terms of championship points. So, you know, Brandon showing that he can run with the best of the best. So this is an exciting battle. Like I said, Sebestian has showed great performances in the past 2 World Championships. You know, top cutting in the Seniors Division in 2015, top cutting in the Masters Division in 2016. Brandon just barely whiffing that top cut in Boston in 2015. So, you know, Brandon really just hanging in there, just trying to prove himself.
Yeah, and that's the kind of games you get when you're playing on the international stage.
Yeah.
So let's talk Game 3.
Back to team preview.
Back to team preview. Back to the game. We saw some great adjustments by Brandon there. Brought the same 4 Pokemon, but played them in a way that really allowed for more favorable outcomes for him.
And look at that. Right now,
yeah.
Brandon's already locked into his team. Brandon knows what he wants in terms of what to bring. You know, Sebestian just follows a little bit after. You know, Sebestian, you could see it in his face that he was a bit flustered, but, you know, stay calm, stay cool, stay collected. And I'm excited. Game 3.
Yeah, Game 3.
Round 4. Both players undefeated.
Round 4, Game 3. Undefeated.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy.
Oh.
So, yeah, it should be interesting to see how things played out. If I had to make a guess, I would assume that both these trainers feel very comfortable with the matchup in terms of the Pokemon they've brought to the last couple games, so probably won't see any mix-ups there. I think the big mix-up is going to be how they play it.
Yep, and the exact same leads as Game 1 between Sebestian and Brandon. Porygon 2 and Tapu Koko for Brandon's side. Persian and Tapu Koko for Sebastian's side. So Sebestian really going back, you know, looking back is like, well, the Cortana did get a KO, but at the same time it got KO'd right after. So making a slight adjustment here, going back to his roots in Game 1.
Yeah, it's an interesting adjustment. Porygon 2, we've seen it attack more than anything this time around, so I wouldn't be surprised if Persian fakes out that Tapu Koko again. Porygon 2 might target down the Persian, or maybe even target down the Tapu Koko with some sort of attack. I think the big question is going to be whether or not Sebestian tries to knock out the opposing Tapu Koko, and if he does try, whether or not he's able to. We've seen so much damage being thrown around. We know that he has that Electrium Z on his Tapu Koko to guarantee that knockout if he wants to go for it. And we saw that Tapu Koko was really sort of the clutch Pokemon for Brandon in that game too.
And Persian now using Fake Out on the Tapu Koko with a critical hit, doing a little bit more damage. Sebastian's Tapu Koko now going to go for a Volt Switch, targeting down the Tapu Koko. Exact same turn as game 1, really. So now Sebastian gets to choose what he sends in to better deal with these leads. it is going to be the Snorlax, so maybe setting for
turn.
Trick Room. Yep.
Same turn. You know, covering, trying to figure out if he's going to maybe set up Trick Room, but instead Porygon 2 does something we haven't seen it do yet, recover.
Which is unusual, because usually when we see Porygon 2, we always assume that it's going to be recovering as much as it can, but right there, really, Brandon was just trying to anticipate getting targeted down on that Porygon 2 slot. You know, let's just move on. I'm just going to recover back whatever you throw, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah, very safe play by Brandon there, and I think that was the play that he had to make. You know, the Porygon 2 could have done a little bit of damage, but if it had gotten knocked out, or if it had gotten hit by that Electrium Z, it would have been easy for it to get knocked out, but really interesting play this time around.
Yeah, Persian here switching out with that parting shot, going to hit that Tapu Koko and drop its attack and special attack stat, going to switch into Arcanine, so really the exact same thing is happening here in Game 1 for Sebastian's side. A little change up over on Brandon's side, but the cool thing here is that Tapu Koko gets a switch out, doing a lot of damage in that electric terrain to that Arcanine.
After the parting shot. So I think we were a little bit uncertain last game, but now I feel more confident to say I think that Tapu Koko is holding the Choice Specs item to boost that special attack. You know, take advantage of the electric terrain, take advantage of its already pretty amazing special attack stat, and just do good work. But hey, that's another adjustment right there.
Tapu Fini switching in here for the Tapu Koko as Porygon 2 going for a Thunderbolt in that Arcanine slot as high horsepower from Snorlax connects onto Tapu Fini with a critical hit. So a little bit more damage than Brandon really would have liked that turn.
Yeah, but Tapu Fini is still pretty happy, I think, to be out on the field. That could be the adjustment that Brandon made for this game. Maybe bringing the Tapu Fini instead of the Kartana to better check that Arcanine. You know, Tapu Fini, we've seen them with Scald today. We know that usually Tapu Fini has a move like Muddy Water, maybe Moonblast, able to really stop that Arcanine in its tracks. So a great adjustment there. The big question is, though, Tapu Fini known not to really be able to handle Snorlax that well. Snorlax is still at full health. This might give Sebastian the opportunity he wants to be able to use a few curses, boost that Snorlax attack, so that when Brandon does start when he does start attacking and dealing more damage, that Snorlax will be ready to just counter it right off the bat.
Persian switching in as Gigalith switches in here, so no Kartana on Brandon's side, which may be an issue because Sacred Sword is no longer accessible to Brandon to bypass those curse boosts. You know, Snorlax now using this turn to set up the curse, going to boost its defense, its attack, and drop its speed, making it really an ideal Trick Room Pokemon here. Snorlax, again, getting those nice boosts that it enjoys setting up with.
And there's the Trick Room. Unfortunately for Brandon, that really was not the move you wanted to send out right there.
Yeah, and Persian coming out this turn actually gives it fake out access too, so good position for Sebastian.
Yeah, you know, he really great play there. He was able to, I don't even know if that was a prediction for the Trick Room, honestly. I think that was just his best play overall. To have the Persian out on the field to fake out something, give Snorlax the opportunity to maybe curse again. He was under no threat last turn, and if anything, Brandon really just helped him, you know, gave him more of an offensive presence that I definitely appreciate it. I would if I were in his shoes.
Yeah, so now the Snorlax can hit Gigalith with a powerful high horsepower. That's an option. Gigalith does have already a sky-high physical defense stat naturally, so Gigalith should be able to hang on, but again, it's not going to be enough damage. There's just not enough damage output on Brandon's side right now because that Snorlax has already set up a curse.
Yeah, I mean, Gigalith could attempt to try and match that curse maybe and then use that Z move we saw a couple games ago to try and knock out something, but I don't think it's going to be much help here. It's going to have to hold on through this high horsepower first.
It does, and now Gigalith using this turn to set up a curse as well. Porygon 2 is not going to be able to move at all because that Persian hit it with a fake out, not going to allow it to move. It's just going to flinch, and there it is. There's the flinch. So right now, the Gigalith's in better position.
It's in a better position. It needed to get that curse there. I think the reason why the fake out went into the Porygon 2 though was because Sebastian was afraid of Porygon 2 realizing its mistake and maybe going for a second Trick Room to try and speed things up a little bit in Brandon's favor. But, you know, good play there. I think if he did click the Trick Room button and use curse at the same time, knowing that the Persian was going to fake out one of those, he could really let Sebastian sort of you know, pick whichever worst thing he wants to deal with. In this case, stop the Trick Room potentially, but gave Gigalith the attack and defense boost and the speed drop. So Gigalith should still be able to move first before the Snorlax and get one attack in, maybe that Z move before it gets knocked out.
Persian switching out here, going to save that fake out support for just a little bit later, but also going for Arcanine here to go for an Intimidate. Going to lower Gigalith's attack stat by 1 stage, bringing it down to a neutral attack stage. That's going to allow it to possibly survive or allow Snorlax to survive a possible Continental Crush, but instead Gigalith protects here as Snorlax uses high horsepower in that protect, as Porygon 2 going for a Thunderbolt here, going to connect onto that Snorlax, doing a little bit more chip damage as well.
Yeah, Brandon trying to get that Snorlax slowly closer to the point where a Continental Crush, even with the Intimidate, will be able to knock it out. It's going to be close. I think that Brandon might need one more turn of the Sandstorm and the Thunderbolt, barring a critical hit for once, because that would then cause Snorlax to eat that Mago Berry and heal itself right back up. But Gigalith can't really afford to go risk the double protect here. You know, you only have a 30% chance of getting it. Those aren't the kind of odds that you want to be playing, especially when you're in round 4 of Swiss at such a big tournament. You can afford a loss, but you don't really want to be putting yourself in situations quite yet where you're rolling the dice for those wins. So instead, I think the safer play here would be to go for the Z move anyways, maybe get lucky with a critical hit, or just otherwise get rid of the berry on the Snorlax so that moving forwards, you're either going to force Sebastian to go for something like a Recycle to get it back, or which means that's one less turn he could be attacking, or just have the Snorlax sitting there with less health overall. Yep,
and Porygon 2 now switching out, going into Tapu Fini to maybe better deal with the Arcanine on the other side, as Gigalith not even going for the Continental Crush, just going for a Rock Slide, possibly going for a flinch here.
That's another way to stop your opponent from moving for a turn.
Following in the footsteps of Tapu Koko, but Snorlax instead gets to go for the high horsepower and picks up the KO on that Gigalith. Oh, never mind. All right.
Whoa, awesome. Okay, Gigalith holding on.
But the berry is going to activate, so Snorlax now is at almost max health, so Gigalith hanging on. Gigalith still gets one more turn, but of course Persian can always just come back in and just go for a fake out or a feint to pick up the KO.
Yeah, feint would definitely be the safer play here. I think if Gigalith, we did see that protect, we know that most likely going to try to protect again. But you know, that was a really, I think, lucky break there for Sebastian. Your Rock Slide was a strong play from Brandon. Sometimes going for flinches is really all you can hope for, and the odds of a flinch are certainly higher than those of getting a double protect, but just didn't work out in that instance. Now Sebastian free to feint the Gigalith. Tapu Fini will be able to attack. I don't know if Double Edge would knock it out at that range. It's going to be close. So I think the best thing for Brandon to do right now is, again, maybe now start leaning a little bit on luck. Maybe try and stall out your own Trick Room so that your Pokemon can come in and be faster than that Snorlax. Muddy Water, try to get some accuracy drops going. It's a really interesting spot because even though Sebastian is down in terms of the Pokemon count, I think he's ahead in terms of the momentum.
You can also withdraw Gigalith too.
I mean, that's another valid play. Not really sure why you would do that. It's at such low health. Maybe to preserve the Sandstorm for later, or
you want to save that Continental Crush for later,
or the Continental Crush as well. But
yeah, and you bait that Persian attacking that slot. Snorlax using Double Edge here, going to connect into Tapu Fini. It is enough to KO. A critical hit seals the deal right there. Right there would have been a good position for Tapu Fini to possibly just go for a Moonblast in that Persian slot. But
yeah, I think that's what Brandon might have been trying to avoid by, or trying do so he could stop that Persian from feinting the Gigalith moving forwards. But with Tapu Koko out on the field now, certainly it does have access to that Dazzling Gleam. We saw it get knockouts with that earlier, and it's not at a point where a move like Feint would easily be able to knock it out. So Brandon still has options here. Porygon 2 sticking around so that Gigalith will have the opportunity to use that Z move at a later point in time. Probably his best bet. So if I were Sebastian, I think it would be time to start focusing in on that Porygon 2, start dealing damage, and just hope that Porygon 2 doesn't keep clicking that recover button.
Yeah, and Tapu Koko in right now is actually good for Brandon because that's a little bit more offensive pressure.
Definitely.
The Dazzling Gleam should be able to pick up the KO on Persian. Like we've already mentioned, you know, it's a high physical defense stat, not a special defense stat. And of course, we saw how much damage that actually did to Snorlax in the previous game. You know, that those Dazzling Gleams kept hitting and hitting and hitting that Snorlax and eventually wore it down. So Brandon still has the pieces as long as he can have Tapu Koko still around and Gigalith as well, because now Gigalith is not going to be affected. But Persian now using Parting Shot, going to switch out, going to drop the special attack stat of Tapu Koko by another stage, or by the first stage. It was the second Parting Shot of the game. First one this time that Tapu Koko has been sent out. So now Tapu Koko is going to come in for Sebastian.
Yeah, so that's a good play there. Tapu Koko not as afraid of the Dazzling Gleam, but Tapu Koko on Brandon's side of the field making a great read there. Volt Switch allowing it to switch out and reset the drop special attack and sort of keep that threat for the Persian for a later game. Gigalith might get knocked out here, though. I don't know.
Yeah, and Gigalith at such low health, you know, it would have been better position for Brandon to have both Gigalith and the you know, both
Porygon too.
No, Gigalith and the Tapu Koko in at the same time, but you got to pick one. You know, preserve that Tapu Koko for just a little bit later, and also better deal with the Persian in the back. Actually, this is not bad position for Brandon, because Brandon now can come in and just start dazzling gleaming everything.
Yep, and that was, I think, why the Gigalith was the one to get knocked out there. It's, you know, Brandon had a couple of win conditions here. This is definitely his most reliable. The Snorlax is left with such little health now. Dazzling Gleam from Tapu Koko should be able to knock it out. There might be some interesting, if the Tapu Koko on Sebastian's side of the field is able to outspeed the opposing Tapu Koko, we still haven't seen that Z move from his side of the field. We know that that Tapu Koko has it. It's that, I think, is going to decide this game. I haven't been keeping track as closely as I usually do, so I'm not sure which one of these Tapu Koko is faster. It could just be a tie.
I believe so.
So it's going to be close, and that's what happens when you get games of these caliber. You know, they come down to, well, which Tapu Koko is going to move first? Oh, well, you know, which is Porygon 2's Ice Beam going to freeze? Are we going to see some fully paralysis? It all is just so close.
Yeah, and if Brandon can pick up the KO on the Snorlax and have his Tapu Koko stick around for just one more turn and be able to deal with that Persian, that's good position for Brandon. Tapu Koko on Sebastian's side here protecting, so it's going to set up for, it's going to end up setting up for the Persian come in with Fake Out support. So this Dazzling Gleam here going to connect on that Snorlax, pick up the KO. Porygon 2 gets to go for a move. Going for a Thunderbolt here. No, he's going to hit the protect, so nothing else. Sebastian
keeping that protect hidden until what was the second to last turn, I think, of the very last game in this set, and that was a really strong play by him. He didn't even have to worry about the speed tie, because he knew he had the protect. He knew that he was able to stop it and not get knocked out this turn, and that was exactly what he needed. And that's what you see from players who are, you know, so highly ranked in the field. They know how to hide the moves that they need to keep hidden until the very end. You know how to sort of manage the field, manage the damage you're doing. Just really well played by both these trainers. This game is so close.
Yeah, in this case, you could go for the Dazzling Gleam. It could be close as to whether or not it's going to pick up the KO on the Tapu Koko, but of course, even if it gets down in that range, Persian has access to Feint. Persian can just easily feint next turn, even go for a foul play. So smart play from Sebastian to be able to set up this end game perfectly here as Persian goes for a Fake Out, going to connect onto Tapu Koko as Sebastian's Tapu Koko now goes for a Dazzling Gleam and picks up the KO on Tapu Koko. So Porygon 2 left versus Persian and the Tapu Koko. Porygon 2 here setting up for a sort of end game with that Trick Room, but I don't think Brandon has the pieces to be able to seal the deal.
It depends. It depends on how much time is left in this game. It depends on whether or not this Porygon 2 is able to knock out something, and it depends on whether or not this Porygon 2 is able to recover in addition to knocking something out. Given the fact that it's already below half its health, we know it's going to move first. It could use Recover this turn, but Tapu Koko Persian will be able to attack it twice at that point in time. So it's not looking likely, but I think I said that about the last game, and I was proven wrong. So, you know, this is Pokemon. Let's see what's going to happen.
Porygon 2 here using Recover as Tapu Koko not going for the Gigavolt Havoc just yet. Going to go for a Thunderbolt here and connect on that Porygon 2, doing about enough damage to bring it down to about 50% as Persian using Foul Play here. Going to do a decent amount of damage, bringing Porygon 2 about 40%. So the only out Brandon has right now is to go for a couple Ice Beams and hope for some freezes.
Yeah, and he has to do that starting this turn. I mean, he could keep clicking that Recover button, but because Sebastian still has 2 Pokemon on the field, if this game were to go to time, Sebastian would win because he still has the majority of Pokemon, which is the first one of the tiebreaker rules, if you will. But we see Porygon 2 going for a second recover, so Brandon happy to keep sitting here, maybe trying to stall out the PP of some of the moves on the field, but Sebestian going for the big play.
Yep, here it is, the Gigavolt Havoc boosted by the electric terrain. Going to go ahead and do massive amounts of damage to this Porygon 2, if not just even pick up the KO from here. So, again, I think Brandon had to go for a freeze on that Tapu Koko and then go for another freeze on that Persian as well, just to kind of slow things down on Sebastian's side. But, Porygon 2 hangs on. But Persian now going for a foul play, and that should be enough to do it. So it looks like Sebestian Escalante is going to... Nope. Well, and the stance from two sides. Okay, all right. One more turn.
One more turn.
I'm speaking a bit ahead, so... one
more chance for a freeze, or I think
well, you have to
now that
here.
electric terrain is gone.
You have to recover here.
And... Or you just get knocked out by Feint. Yeah.
So that does it. Sebestian Escalante sealing the deal versus Brandon Tuchtenhagen. Sebestian Escalante, you know... Don't sleep on Latin America.
Really?
Latin America is a very strong region, and Sebestian just proving that, you know, with Alolan Persian taking it. And Alolan Persian did such a big role in that game.
That's what makes Alolan Persian so fun, you know, with moves like Foul Play, it can you can still do damage provided that you're targeting down a physical attacker. With moves like Fake Out, you can cause your opponent to flinch. Feint stops Protect. Parting Shot stops, you know, those big Z moves from dealing as much damage.
It's Intimidate and a special Intimidate all in one, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's one of those Pokemon that we haven't seen played that much this season, but it's really an interesting tech going into Worlds when you start seeing more bulky Pokemon, and the Pokemon having to be a little bit more offensive to sort of counteract that bulk. So hey, you can say, I'm going to use Parting Shot, I'm going to get my Intimidate on the field when I want it to be on the field, and I'm going to stop you from maybe getting that knockout that you thought you might get.
Yeah, and great adjustments from both players in the entire 3-game series. You know, game 1, that Arcanine came in, burned that Gigalith, and really just took away Brandon's answer to the Arcanine versus that Kartana, right? Going into game 2, Brandon revealing his super secret tech right there with the Vacuum Wave Kartana, being able to just pick off the opposing Scarf Kartana. So, you know, that was a great adjustment right there. And Brandon set himself up in a much better position to be a bit more offensive. Going into game 3, you know, Sebestian kind of took a step back. You know, the adjustments were exactly what he had in game 1.
Yeah.
And, you know, really turn 1 was kind of weird for Brandon because he recovered when he was already at full health.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. I think the Tapu Fini was the right adjustment that he had to make on paper. I just think that in terms of execution, he fell a little bit short, but that's okay. You know, he only has 1 loss. He has the rest of the game to sort of recover from that. I'm more curious about what Sebestian might think about that game.
Yeah, I'm actually interested to hear as well. But like I said, the Persian was such an important part of Sebastian's team. I would say he's one of the world's best Persian players.
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah,
I think that's fair to say. If you're at the top of your area's ladder, if you will, you know, he's the #1 player in Latin America, as you said. Yeah. And you play Persian, I think it's safe to say.
He actually didn't get to play the top 8 in